Hello. Hi, friends. Welcome to
Hi.
Hi. Welcome to the Making Spaces podcast. My name is, you can just say hi. You can laugh. This is great.
Okay. Great.
We're glad you're here. I am Sarah, and this is
Josie,
and we are really polished. If we were going to describe our podcast, it would be polished, really.
very professional.
Very professional. Look at your crown.
The most.
We are the most.
Wow.
Professional, yes.
Wow.
But this is a podcast really about making space for people, both literally and figuratively. We are, I'm a pastor and artist and designer, and Josie is a designer and artist and runs our church because she's the administrator. But we want to gather folks around this idea of what does it mean to make space for others. So today on the podcast, we decided to be very confusing and have two Roberts. One of them is Rob and one of them is Robert. And we'll let you figure that out later. They both are part of something known as Social Thread, which is kind of for folks who are trying to figure out this spiritual thing without having kind of the thing that maybe like a doctrine or a need for these are the 4 things you have to believe and all this sort of stuff. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but these two are incredible space makers for people who are asking those questions. And then they also run a consulting firm for folks who are trying to figure out, how do I do church in this day and age? So welcome to the show. All right.
Thanks for having us.
Oh my gosh.
Thanks for having us.
I have to admit to you before I ask the first question, I'm having a little bit of PTSD because my dad's name is Rob. He goes by Bob. My uncle is named Alan, but his first name is actually Rob. Right? My uncle,
Yep.
My mom has 4 siblings. So my mom married Bob. My aunt married Robert Allen. My next in line is my uncle who married, I'm glad you asked, Bobby. And
Yes.
then after that, the 4th person in our family, my aunt, it looked like she was going to get married to someone, but he didn't have the appropriate name. So that ended, and she ended up going and meeting my now uncle, Rob. Thanks for asking. So everyone in my family
I
is
thought you were going to
married.
say Steve.
Yeah.
No, everyone in my family is named Bob. So this is like very comfortable for me. So guys, thank you for doing that for me. Josie,
We're here for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In your Hispanic family, do you have a name that everyone has?
Well, we don't do Robert, we do Roberto. So,
Roberto.
Nice.
I have a couple of those, but they're father and son, so you don't really got to worry about it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Although I'm curious why neither of you goes by Bob.
Ooh.
Because neither of us are 65 years old yet.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's
You're right,
Bob
you're right,
Heath,
you're
if
right.
you're
True.
listening to this, they're
Oh.
not judging you, Dad.
Although I had a ski instructor who insisted on calling me Bob when I was like 15 years old once. So thank you, Kirkwood Ski Resort ski instructor guy who thought it would be funny to call me
Give you
Bob
a new
all day.
name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love it. So the first question I have, and I'm going to ping pong it to whichever one of you. Ping pong? Does that what humans say? I don't know.
Yeah.
Popcorn?
Popcorn.
Popcorn.
Thing.
No, I'm hungry.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Because of ping pong or popcorn?
Both.
Yeah.
Okay. The question is this: where is your favorite space and why? And it can be as metaphorical as you want, or it can be like a very tangible, actual space. Go.
Oh, I have answers for both of those.
Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, like the metaphorical space is wherever my friends and family are. Right. Yeah. Oh. It's with you folks. Anywhere there's community happening, that's my favorite. That's what gives me life. That's what gives me energy. If I think of like physical spaces, I don't live in Phoenix anymore. I live in Tucson now, but you see this poster over my shoulder, and I don't think if you're listening to a podcast, you're seeing anything except for, what's on your screen.
You can describe it.
Yeah. So in my office, my home office, I have a poster for the Crescent Ballroom, which is a music venue in downtown Phoenix. And it sort of was like the centerpiece around when I started City Square Church, which was a new at the time, Progressive United Methodist Faith community in downtown Phoenix. And my co-pastor and I just spent a lot of time drinking beer and eating nachos by ourselves, wondering if anyone would ever show up to our stuff.
Oh my gosh, that's the name of my memoir. Drinking
Right?
nachos by
Eating
myself, a memoir.
You know what? I've had beer and nachos with you at least once.
Oh yeah, no, there's a whole
Yeah.
hashtag with our friends called Mama Needs Nachos.
Yes. Yes. So, but you know, we gathered a movement in that space. We ended up doing something called Gospel Brunch there, and became really good friends with the bartenders and the wait staff and the owner. And it's a space that is special in my heart when we talk about physical spaces.
I love it. All right, Roberto.
Yeah, for me, the mountain that is right outside of my house is my space. And it's a place where I can be reflective and think of great ideas and listen to music and come up with all sort of cool stuff. And that's it. And then, of course, where my family is, you know, one of my goals in life is to spend as much time with my family as absolutely possible. So, man, listen to my kids laugh. That's, you know, the best.
I love that. Both of your spaces are fantastic. As we talk about having you guys on here as space makers, you guys have created this sort of model for doing church when people, I mean, not even church, just for gathering community. The name's Social Thread. You want to tell me why Social Thread and talk a little bit about the community that you were cultivating, curating? You guys, you're welcome. Curating. That's the word I'm going to use.
Community curators. So the name came from it's a spin off the concept of social fabric. So I'm big into community, building community, social stuff like sociology. I don't know.
You're also big into textiles too, so.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah. So
Josie, did you notice he's wearing a Long Beach hat? It's a nod to you, Los Angelian.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, it's my alma mater, California State University, Long Beach. Go 49ers, but our mascot is now a shark. So, but we're not the Sharks. Anyway, so social fabric, that idea of society is made up of a diversity of people and of places and of experiences, and that social fabric is tighter when the threads all come together and and the tighter they are, the better our social fabric is. So each one of us is a thread in that fabric. So therefore, social thread. See what I did there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. And you know, faith is a huge part of who we are, and it's a huge part of our society, of that social fabric. And whether we've had a good experience with it or a bad experience, or we call it spirituality, or part of being something bigger than ourselves, or trying to, you know, gain some sort of bigger wisdom to believe in something else. And so social thread is creating a space where we can each come together and bring our own unique experiences and backgrounds and have that exploration of faith, of spirituality, to where we can be on that journey together, and you're not alone. And it's a place to belong, and a place where we hope people can thrive on that journey.
I know, because you and I have talked about this before, that this was based off of a lot of work done on actual, like you had a actual marketing.
Yes.
I don't know the word. Josie, what's the word? Marketing person, planner.
Market research.
That.
Yes.
I know that you had a market researcher. I'm
Yeah.
with words, which is why I get paid to speak.
Yes.
Who came in before you did that? Can you talk a little bit about how that has played in? And like, as you're making space for people, it's not just this idea of like, you guys set and said, we're all important, because theoretically, I think all churches are saying that. Well, I mean, some are saying like, you're really crappy threads and you need to get together so you won't be as crappy threads. But I think, what was the marketing research? Like, what came out of that? Because I think that's such a unique start. Something.
So So I'll back up. I mentioned the church start I did in downtown Phoenix, and which was an amazing part of my life for 3 years. But in year 3, um, you can't work 80 hours a week and
What?
try to be married and raise 2 little kids and be a healthy human. And I hit a wall. It took me 6 months to figure out I had hit a wall, and I was a not great person to be around. So I ended up taking a year off of ministry, and just to find myself and figure out, like, hey, who am I? What am I doing here? In the context of being a pastor, especially. And when I came out of that time of leave, I was like, man, there's got to be a better way to do this. There's got to be a way where people can come around the best of faith, the best of religion, the best of spirituality, where it can be life-giving, where it can actually help make life less painful and more meaningful. And there's got to be a better way to do it where we don't drive leaders into insanity and burnout while we do it too. So at the same time, I came across an opportunity to project manage a market research project for the Desert Southwest Conference of the United Methodist Church, to use some grant funds to go out and find a professional firm to help us figure out, like, why are people leaving church? Why are people leaving organized religion? But what are those needs that they have, the spiritual needs they have that they still want to have fulfilled, but they've said that I can't do that at church anymore. Church is irrelevant. It's too much of a painful experience, or it was never something that was part of my life or my family's life anyway, and I don't understand it. It just seems like a hateful, judgmental place. So that was a really, really amazing project I kind of stepped into, and worked with the firm for a year and did all kinds of surveys and studies and conversations with people around their attitudes of religion and spirituality. And we did find out that folks do have spiritual needs. They are still looking for their purpose in life. They still want to know how to be more compassionate, how to be more generous, and they're deeply craving community. And church scratches those itches for a lot of people and fulfills that role for a lot of people. But for more and more people, the research found the church does not do that, but people don't know where to have those needs fulfilled if it's not the church. Like, no viable alternative on a mass scale has come up to say, okay, we can fulfill the needs of folks that they used to have fulfilled at church.
So not CrossFit.
Well, I think for some people, yeah. No, but it's seriously though, like I think CrossFit, SoulCycle, for me, it was a boxing gym for when I was on leave. Like, I found church in a boxing trainer's garage with like 3 or 4 other people who were just trying to get in shape, but we ended up becoming really good friends. And there was a lot of spiritual things happening there. People finding in coffee shops and bars, or whatever. And those are great if those things are around, but they're not intentionally trying to help you explore your faith intentionally help you try to, I mean, I think you can do it if you put that work in, and if you're trying to do that yourself, then it can happen. But I don't think everyone's going into CrossFit being like, oh man, this is church,
I think CrossFit sounds like Josie's hell.
I am allergic to exercise. And my cousin is actually a CrossFit trainer, and that's where our whole like friendship group is, which is so nice for her. But also, I don't need my friends telling me to work out.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. It meets a certain aspect, right? And I think that you start asking questions beyond that. And so when you and I sat down forever ago and started talking about like, what did this study discover? I think what was interesting for me, and also like kind of affirming of the nudge that I felt, is that people really do want to investigate these bigger questions, but they don't want to do it within a framework that doesn't make space for where they already are. Like, do I have to put all of these thoughts on a shelf to investigate this part of me? So we joke about CrossFit, but CrossFit is great in that it gives you community and friends, but it's for your working your body out. But there's not like this mental component necessarily.
Mhm.
You're probably not asking the really big questions as you're doing deep squats. Although I did go to a
Different kind
Bible
of
study
questions.
for
Yeah.
CrossFit called Deep Thoughts and Squats. And it was really good. And also I broke my finger, but it's fine. But I love working
That's a
out.
different kind of abusive
Yeah.
institutional
I love working.
relationship, I
I'm
think.
different, right? But I
Yeah.
think these big questions are still being asked, and people are going to continue asking that. So even as our social fabric is changing in a lot of ways, people want to be able to bring all of themselves into something. And I think they're no longer willing, from the research that you were talking about, they're no longer willing to just go to a place that only allows them to bring part of themselves. They want to bring the whole questioning self.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the big finding that you're alluding to was that the world is sort of, humans live on this continuum of what we call traditionalists on one side, explorers on the other side. And for the longest time, the world leaned more towards the traditional side, which was there's sort of one way to practice your faith. And that's with somebody standing up front with the rule book and saying, here's the rules, and this is what we do. And people said, great. I'll just go follow the rules this week and I'll be connected to God. But there's always been folks who say, but you know what? There's lots of different places to gain religious, spiritual, faith-based wisdom from to help me figure out what I'm supposed to do with my life and why I'm here and how this is all supposed to function. And so I'll take a little from here, a little from there, a little from there, and I'll figure all that out on my own, maybe in community with other folks and maybe with some rules and structure. But for the most part, at the end of the day, I'm going to say, you know what? I have my own beliefs and I came up with them on my own terms. And those folks are what we call explorers. But now, over the last few decades, the world is shifting more and more rapidly towards the explorer spectrum. So there's just more and more explorers and less traditionalists. And churches are trying to say, hey, we need to reach young people, quote unquote, and make them traditionalists. And explorers, your brain's not wired to be that way if you're an explorer. And so it's always going to seem like a foreign concept to be like, wait, you want me to go sit in a chair or a pew with wheels on it, like at your church, Sarah and Josie, and have somebody talk at me and tell me what to believe every week? That sounds terrible. What an awful idea. But for people who love that, there's no judgment there. We still need churches for folks who need that authority in their lives to help them explore their faith. But we need new spaces, and we need more spaces for people to explore on their own terms. But also not just like, hey, come believe whatever you want. You can have Robert talk about sort of what we call our pillars and guideposts of, hey, here's a structure, here's some guides for you of how to do that. You still get to ask the questions, but we're going to provide some resources and some structure and maybe some, I guess, coaching, for you along the way.
That's really good language. Josie and I recently talked to another artist who was talking about how it's really hard to be an artist in the church. And because I was shocked, Josie actually, and Ariel really helped me think through. I didn't realize that they were being asked to be traditionalists, right? I think that was that language you would use, Josie, like the experience of you can't really be an artist because here are the rules and you're breaking them.
Yeah, I mean, this whole conversation is one I've been continuously having with my dad, actually, because my dad had us grow up in a very Pentecostal, charismatic church. And now he goes to this huge megachurch in Anaheim where it's all lights and trumpets and screens everywhere. And he does not understand that that's not my vibe. Like, I do not. And I mean, they're also, more traditional in the sense that women have a certain role and gay people can come, but they're not going to heaven or whatever, right? And explaining to my dad, like, you can believe whatever you want, Dad, but then I can therefore believe whatever I want. And as Sarah was saying, from the artist perspective, it's more of like, my funny line is that I don't have the luxury of discriminating against words because I'm a writer, and so I can say fuck whenever I want.
and does.
And I do. And my dad doesn't understand that, like, all these people that are more traditional don't understand that artists function in a different way, and that doesn't change because you're a Christian. Like, I have to
Yeah.
be loud and boisterous because that's my artistic practice, and that's not going to go away because I believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
I like your believe in Jesus voice because I believe in Jesus.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I love this idea that you are, however, providing structure for people. So Robert, if you would like, I would love to hear what these pillars are, or what it's not a willy-nilly, everyone come on in. I mean, everyone, yes, come on in, but there is something that we're moving towards. Is that what I'm hearing?
Mhm. Yeah, you know, because the research still, even though everyone is an explorer, there is still a significant part of the research to where it says that the teachings of Jesus is very important. And so I think that even because that we are a Western culture, that is something that we identify with already. And what we're trying to do is to take the absolute essential of what Jesus is saying and expanding on that. And essentially that's it's essentially the greatest commandment. It's, you love the Lord your God as yourself. You love the Lord your God and your neighbor as yourself, excuse me. And so that's pretty much what we've divided the pillars into, is that, by loving God, we're helping our members define who or what God is, and helping them explore sacred texts, explore the experience of others, and explore spiritual practices. By loving neighbors, it's, answering the question, who is my neighbor? It's practicing compassion. It's learning from all wisdom traditions and practicing generosity. And then loving yourself, it's to learn more about yourself, to practice self-compassion, to set healthy boundaries, and to continue on the journey. And so those pillars are gives us guideposts to how we run a social thread. So it's just not whatever. It's this is a path in which you can explore faith on your own terms.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of our work in making space for people is dealing a lot with folks who have experienced deconstruction or are experiencing a deconstruction of a faith that once was very rigid. So the walls were very rigid. The rules were very rigid. And there comes a moment, I feel like, as I'm journeying with people, where they go, there are no rules. And it's not the comforting thing they thought they would feel. I think about that commercial where the guy like there's no rules, because I forget, it's like a cell phone commercial, and he takes his shirt off in the grocery store and the guy's like, push your shirt back on. He's like, there's some rules. I think that there is some safety and boundaries in, like, you're not the first to think through these things. Oh, okay. Sometimes that feels a little bit like, oh, I can pause and breathe for a minute. I don't have to panic. There are maybe some suggestions and patterns, but when it's not as rigid, when the walls are maybe movable, or the space has a little more room for myself. I mean, I love even that part of scripture that you're talking about, like love your neighbor as yourself. I will never forget the first time I preached that within the space of our community. I had this profound moment where I realized so many people don't love themselves. And not only that, but have been told they're garbage, because that's the narrative, is like, you will buy my faith tradition if you believe you are garbage enough, and I can tell you how to be not garbage, right? Yeah. And so I don't know if you have that experience, but sometimes when I hear this, like people talking about like self-care, all this kind of stuff, I almost have a bristly reaction, because I'm like, oh no, don't be narcissistic, because I grew up with the belief that to care or love myself could be problematic, because it, causes me to question or move in that way. So I'm glad to hear you have some of those things, but you're thinking through, how do we allow people to question who they are, not just what they're about.
Yeah. I don't know. That might be a good place. Robert has a really powerful story, I think, related to that and how you found Social Thread. I know, you know, I don't know how comfortable you are sharing what parts of that story or how relevant that is
Sure.
here, but
Yeah, sure. No, but just very quickly, you know, so as a worship pastor, I was a worship pastor at a big and evangelical church that would have all of those screens and lights and all of those things, and I would create those spaces. And several years ago, I remember being on the platform, and we didn't call it a stage, but we called it a platform, leading and going, I don't necessarily believe what I'm saying, or I don't really feel like this is like I'm being true to me and the questions that I have, and I just feel like I'm being not authentic in my expression of my faith. I'm not connecting with God in this way, and it just feels like a show to me. And so when I left that, I did not have a safe place to go. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know who to ask. I was just kind of going around on the internet and, you know, so, hey, there's Richard Rohr. Let's see what this guy says. You know, well, you know, and I think what you realize is that you start asking these questions, and one question opens up another question, and suddenly I began questioning every single thing. Not only that I grew up, because I grew up in a real conservative Southern Baptist evangelical movement, that boy, if I could shed this guilt that and everything that I did was guilt motivated, and it just became just overwhelming. And I could not find a space where I could explore on my own. I didn't have anybody. And so when I ran across Social Thread, I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm like, there's no way. What is this? This is crazy. I've never heard anything like this. And so, so for me, the whole part about Social Thread is if you're in this evangelical movement and you're like, I can't leave this. I can't leave my tribe. I can't leave the people that these are all my friends. And so I didn't have anywhere to go. And I was rejected by friends and family. People told me, you're crazy. What are you doing?
And your livelihood, let's, name that as well. Your livelihood was based on you professing these certain things.
Right. And it would have been a huge problem, huge problem. And, you know, you lose all as a vocational pastor, you lose a lot of things financially, even more so than just income and insurance. And so when I found Social Thread, I realized if I could create a space that would exist for people like me, they would go, oh, okay, I don't have to lose all of my friends. I can have a space where I can explore things in a non-judgmental way, but in an idea where I don't have to be New Age, I don't have to be Buddhist, I don't have to be, but you can learn from those traditions, sure, but it's a space that's less scary, because for me it was really scary, you know, because when I first started, I'm like, oh, I'm leaving this whole thing totally, and I'm never going back. But you know, and I have since reconciled a lot of the paradoxes of our faith, and you know, I would say that I have a much deeper faith now than I think I ever have. So anyway, I try not to cry, guys. So,
it's okay. I mean, this is the
it's crying aloud.
But
Yes.
when I first met Rob, I just told him I could not believe that this exists, and I truly believe that there are other people out there like me, and other people out there who would never connect to church, but are desperately needing a community to work out their faith and feel like they can belong and they can thrive even.
Yep. I think that there's a structure or a system that says questioning only leads to more questions, which only leads to more questions, and that's problematic. Where I think, no, like that's what we're created to be about, not just the explorers. I think a lot of us question and wonder, and is there a space for me? Can I fit in somewhere? And I'm really glad that you found this thing that now you're a part of, and you're creating more space. And I think over the years, guys, we started this podcast in March, but it feels like years. Because COVID years, so it's like 7 years that we've been doing this
7
podcast.
COVID years.
7 COVID years. Is the sense of, okay, like if I'm someone who needs space made and I start making that space for myself, I start making space for other people. Right? Like, when I do the thing that feels so outside of the thing, but it feels so inside of who I should be, and I'm just pressing more into that, there's this expansion rather than a collapse. So our fear is it will collapse and I will not know people, but instead the walls move out a little bit and more people can be part of it. But I think it's really hard to do. And that's why that emotion comes up, right? Like, I'm so afraid I will lose everything if I start down that road. Yeah.
I think the whole idea of social thread is really brave, especially as somebody who questions everything with zero remorse.
That's my Enneagram 8.
Giving people a space to jump into that fear, because a lot of people stay because of fear, right? Like fear of hell, fear of losing everything and everybody, fear of the unknown too. And we talked about this with our friend Kevin in an earlier episode, how people might stick around because they're afraid to not have that person tell them what to do. Because people are looking for guidance, and people are looking for not having to ask the deep questions, and creating almost like sanctuary anywhere where people can question anything and everything, I think is really important in this day and age, when people just are, obviously, as we see during these election season, not questioning enough.
Right. So there's this idea of like, I'm so afraid of questioning that I don't. And in fact, I'm angry that you do.
I've gotten kicked out of plenty of things from questioning too much.
I love working with Josie because our personalities are so different, but it's like, I love her ability to just be like, I don't care. Whereas I'm like, I care too much. But you
create a nice balance.
Yeah. But that's needed, right? I think when we're making spaces, you have to have both the challenger and the person who just wants everyone to feel great, but is still asking big questions.
Yeah. And that's interesting because so every Tuesday, Thursday night, since COVID started, we've been doing what we call the Explore Your Faith meetup, which is essentially the concept came from like a theology pub. If you've ever done theology pub, which is like,
we're going to go to the bar tomorrow night. It's called Theology on Tap for us. Yeah.
So we're going to go to the bar. Now we're going to go to the Zoom and have a beverage maybe, and just talk about sort of current events and life and what's going on. We're going to talk about our faith in a public space and have a beer and not feel guilty about it. Right. So, so that's where we came up with the concept for the meetups. And what's interesting is we made a very deliberate decision to be like, we can talk about politics here, but it's not just going to be all bashing politics, and it's not going to be judging people based on politics. And we're going to talk about it. We're actually going to try to avoid talking about it as much as we can, but we're not going to tell you can't talk about it, because it's not a free for all either of, hey, we're going to show up and sort of dump on each other and just complain about people we disagree with or whatever. But we're actually going to challenge ourselves to have empathy for other folks and not, and just the non-judgment goes both ways, like I lost my train of thought here, but I'm trying to be really powerful. But it's like, let's have the people who care too much, and let's have the folks who are like, F it, I'm angry and I just want to get in here and rip my political opponents. I'm like, well, we can do that on Facebook all day long, and we do that on Facebook all day long, but let's actually challenge ourselves to come together with folks from different perspectives and learn from one another and have that empathy and ask that question, who is my neighbor? Is my neighbor the person who agrees exactly with everything I agree with and that I get together and dunk on other people with? Or is my neighbor everybody? And I have a responsibility to try to understand, not agree with everybody, but just understand and be human with other people. And maybe we can make this world a little,
It's a radical message, actually. It's really easy to get stuck in what's your audience and go aggressively after that audience. And we've got algorithms, and Mark Zuckerberg gets to decide who our friends are. And I realize that the greatest moments in community for me have been the times when I have been pushed or challenged, and just when I think I've arrived right at this great thought and someone brings in something else or an experience. But we don't do that when we are stuck in our silos of belief, right? And I was most profoundly aware of this when we were talking about, someone said something that was really offensive at a Theology on Tap one time. And there's a couple in our community, and the one person said, if there isn't space for him, then there's not space for me. And this was like a lesbian saying, like, his conservatism, like, he'll never change if he doesn't know someone like me. And that's a bold thing. And you have to be like, you have to have worked through your stuff to do that. And it needs to be in an environment where you are not a threat. You're not threatening people, right?
Yes.
But you can say, I don't know how to feel about this. And it was wonderful, because I think so often we do get caught up in, I need to make a thing that where everyone looks just like me. I don't want that. I don't always need church, but I do need people, and I need them to be different than me and be in a different spot. And I grow and learn. And it has to be the kind of place where I love this idea of social thread, because this kind of the idea of like, okay, if I'm a healthier, bigger thread and I bring in some more healthier, bigger threads and we weave our lives together, it's going to look a lot different than if like we're just all frayed and all over the place. I just got off doing a podcast for another pastor, and he was honest and said, I don't want to go back to church. He said, I get to do Sunday mornings with my kids. And he goes, it feels sacred and holy, and I'm over programmed, and my kids are starting to hate the church because all they know it as is the place we have to be for lots of hours on Sunday.
Yes.
So if it's not based on that, if it's based on making all of ourselves healthy and well and our difference in a good way, I think that's a beautiful way of looking at community. And is most of your stuff was online and in person, huh? I didn't realize that there was in-person components to it.
Yeah, that was the plan from the beginning, was because we were trying to avoid everything's online, everything's social media, everything's in our phones and our tablets and our computers. Like, if we can get people face to face with each other, then those deeper bonds can happen across differences, because I think we spend too much time trying to figure out, like, well, how do we have healthy debate? How do we have, like, well, stop having debate, have people start talking about their kids and their favorite sports teams and what beers they like and where they like to go on vacation, what Netflix shows they're watching. And then, way down the road, talk about issues, or never talk about issues. My neighbor down the street from me flies a political flag that is vastly different from my own. I've never talked to him about it. If I see him outside, we talk about the weather, we talk about the neighborhood, we have a lot of desert animals that are flying and running around here and crawling up walls. It's kind of creepy sometimes, but hey, did you see the bobcat the other day? Whatever. We've never once talked about the political flag, and I hope we can keep talking for as long as possible without ever talking about politics.
See, I wonder though, like, I feel like getting to that, I think it should be part of it. I mean, again, just for community, like for this idea of bringing my whole self into something, it's like there has to be a background or a lot of the studies that have been done that again, I'm a nerd, so I read so much stuff, but people don't change their opinion because you had the most facts, right? So the debates are hilarious, right? We're in the season of debates on TV because really people already know what they're going to vote for. They already have these thoughts. It's relationships that change people. So they did a study at, I believe it was Harvard, where a professor had Israeli students and Palestinian students share their side, not trying to change the other. And they found they got closer. So knowing yourself and your beliefs, and they like got closer to the middle. And I think we have spent so much time thinking our job is to yell the other person down, have the most facts. I think it's important to know your beliefs and that sort of stuff, but learning how to engage the other in just like a normal conversation about your kids or about whatever, seeing the other as another. Like, I think it's neat in our community that people are different ages, because that's not actually something in our community. Guys, do you know, like, people really are gunning towards like only certain people of this age will want to come and be involved in that, like, you know, which is great for a marketing perspective, but is not great for actually building real community or change, because people need to encounter people that are different than them, I think.
Yeah. And back to the social fabric metaphor, whether we like it or not, we're all stuck together. We're all connected in some way, and we can decide how tight that connection and how healthy and how strong that connection is going to be. Or like I said, is it going to be frayed, or is it going to be loose, falling apart all over the place? But no matter what we are, no matter how much we try to distance and divide ourselves, that connection is still there, and everything we do to each other has an effect on that overall organism.
Oh, I love that idea. You think about fabric. Josie makes a lot of stuff out of leather, and leather is a very tight fabric.
Oh,
this is all leather right here.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
She's a phenomenal, especially jewelry artist. And I think about fabric like leather or something like that that's very tightly knit. When one part of it starts to go, you lose the whole. There's no like sewing it back up.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and it really depends on each piece really being woven in and tight. It's a great metaphor, guys.
Yeah. And I don't think it means like go find like the most abhorrent, person, opposite political, theological belief that you can think of. Like, we all have someone like we kind of disagree with, and be like, I'd rather not hang around that person, but because we have different beliefs, like, start there,
Yeah.
And one of our guideposts that Robert mentioned is having healthy boundaries. So you do have to decide your red line. Like, okay, I'm not going to put up with racists, whatever. Like, that's a red line for me. But we can go find someone that's maybe like a couple notches, away from your position, and say, I'm going to make an intentional relationship here. And
one thing leads to
it's
another.
Not zero sum. Yeah. Exactly.
It's like the fabric. We just recently had a conversation in our community, because we've got this big, beautiful building. We've made space for people to rent it out, and a community wanted to come and rent it that has been pretty harmful to the LGBTQIA community. And our facilities manager is wonderful, and he's a Black man and Black pastor, like, just so involved in Black Lives Matter and really asking great questions around that. But I had to say to him, he was like, I think we rent the church out to these people, even though they don't agree with us. And I looked at him, I said, would you, because they don't have women in leadership and they don't have LGBTQI full inclusion. And I said, what if I told you that they wouldn't allow men that were Black to be the leader of the church? Would you still want them here? But I don't think him and I could have had that conversation had we not met over other things. If we weren't like actual friends and actually in each other's lives, and, those kind of questions, you kind of can't have those until you've had the other conversations. And that's the problem with Twitter or Facebook or all these online only things, right? Is that it doesn't allow us to get to that level of closeness and tightness and honesty, I think. Right?
I think that's why this whole concept of like a social thread is so interesting, is because you might find yourself in proximity with somebody that doesn't agree with you. And then if you just continuously disconnect yourself from people because you may not always agree, then you might just end up being a lonely little thread in the wind somewhere,
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm as liberal as they come. I'm just too liberal, some would say. But I love having conversations with conservative people. I mean, I've always said that I'm really good at converting conservative people to the dark side of liberalism. But I mean,
she's a, what do you call it? An evangelist.
Yeah,
you
I'm
must
not
be one of
gonna.
those Antifa people, right?
I'm kind of lazy for that, but
I'm too lazy.
I'm a little lazy for that.
I ain't got time to organize.
Exactly. But I love having conversations where I just challenge people, especially, no offense, white men, challenging them to think a little bit
challenge us all day long. Yeah.
Because all it is like, just maybe sometimes you're saying like, okay, well, why don't you like women in leadership in the church? Why don't you like Black Lives Matter? Do you actually know what Marxism is? Blah, blah, blah. The thread keeps going. But if I were to disconnect myself from that, I wouldn't have been able to, one, teach empathy, and to be empathetic.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of this, guys, is we need each other. If we've learned anything through the actual market research or through just your experience, we do need each other. And people who are isolated are the ones who do really radical, horrible things, because they don't have the sense of empathy or humanity. They don't have their humanity. Guys, you have been phenomenal. We could talk to you all day long. This social fabric thing is going to be in my head, but I would love to hear from each of you, Robert and Rob. What is one tangible way that someone listening today who's like trying to think about like, how do I either make space for myself or make space for others? What is like one thing that you would suggest if they can't get involved in a social fabric kind of thing?
Oh, that's such a great question, especially during this time. You know, we were talking at the meetup last night. We're trying to do some of our own, I guess, market research now that we've been doing this since January, since Robert came on board, and dealing with the challenges of, hey, this was all supposed to be in person, and now everybody's on 17 Zooms all the time, and now we're trying to build a thing over Zoom. And like, what fresh hell is this? But you know, in talking to folks, they say, yeah, I was on Zoom all day, but I came to this meetup, and there's sort of no judgment, no expectation here, and it's an opportunity to connect with people in community. And even though it's still happening on a screen, I still leave this sort of recharged for the week. And I'd say that too, like, even though it's my job and we have the same conversation twice a week, and we have it with people like on Thursday, hey, we had the same exact conversation on Tuesday. It's Thursday, we're having the same one, but it's still different somehow. And I still like go to bed really pumped up and feeling like I had, maybe not quite the same, but I still had human connection in a meaningful way. And so that's what I would find, like, even if your work makes you be in technology all day, but technology is the only way for you to connect with other people, like, find healthy ways to do that. Like, don't avoid it. Get on with your family, get on with your college friends, whatever. Join us at a meetup, join Sarah and Josie at Theology on Tap. Do something that's not work related, but you're still having human connection, even if it is over Zoom.
I love that. What about you, Robert?
Yeah, I think I probably echo the same thing, is that it is to really, you know, if people feel stuck, if you feel stuck, is that you have to get to a point where you realize, hey, I'm stuck because I'm trying to do it by myself. I'm trying to do my life, my workout, my faith. I'm trying to do things all by myself. And my challenge would be to find community. And then if you can't find community, you have to be able to ask for help. You have to be able to ask for help, and also, I guess, know you need help too. That's the issue too. So
those are great suggestions. Well, thank you for once again joining us on an episode of Making Spaces. I'm Sarah, and this has been, that's your cue, Josie.
This has been what? Making
You.
Space podcast?
No, this is being Josie.
Oh, well, this is Josie, not Ben. I'm still here.
I know. It's like a British
Yeah.
way of saying it. Anyway, point being, you can find us at Rev Sarah Heath on all social medias, but you can also find us on Instagram at Making Spaces Podcast. You can find Josie at Josie Takes the World. And you can find, I wish everyone could see her sweet dancing moves. I'm hoping that it's filming you right now. We would love to have your voicemails. There's a way to do that if you go to www. No, I can never get it. www.anchor.fm / mother trucker / making spaces. That was a lot, but it's not a lot. And then you'll see that there's a place where you can leave us a voicemail. We're asking the question, where is your favorite space and why? And let me tell you, they have been probably the cutest answers. Yeah?
I agree.
Nice. I want to
Rob.
go with voicemails now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Rob, where can we find you?
So you can find us at socialthread.org or at facebook.com/socialthreadcommunity, on Instagram at getsocialthread. You can check out our podcast at podcast.socialthread.org. We have newsletters, we got podcasts, we got Facebook Lives, we got meetups, we got it all. But socialthread.org, and really go in there, click on Get Involved. You can fill out that form if you want to really jump in and get connected with us directly, but there's also a place to sign up and just get on our newsletter. If you get on that newsletter, you're going to know everything that's going on every week with us. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys, so much for joining us. And we will see you next week, where we will be
Saving a space for you.
We just nailed that. All right, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Guys, thank you.
Hold on. I'm
Later.
going to pause this recording.